What's up, folks? Welcome back to Tactical Tortoise. My name is Trevi, and if you've been paying attention to the competitive 40k metagame at all, you will have seen that Adeptus Mechanicus are absolutely destroying things competitively since the release of their new codex. But today, we got a nerf for Adeptus Mechanicus. Let's talk about it and the implications for the faction. First off, I wanted to talk about this article, and one thing I will apologize for is I'm still working remotely right now, still out on the road, and unfortunately, the internet sucks, so some of these photos in the article here may not load very quickly, but I do want to talk about this MetaWatch article that came out on the heels, or just before, I should say, this most recent errata to Adeptus Mechanicus, and it's just talking about the current 40k metagame and the factions that are doing well, and the thing that I find absolutely fascinating about this article is that it is, you know, basically just a tacit admission that Drukhari and Adeptus Mechanicus, and to a lesser extent Sororitas, are absolutely dominating, and, I mean, let's go out and say it, pretty overpowered codexes. And some of the things that are said in this article basically make it sound like the tinfoil hat conspiracy that everyone has where, you know, oh, Games Workshop's just going to make the latest codex the most powerful and then wait till everyone buys it and then nerfs it. Basically just coming out and saying that. The article talks about factions being released, getting their time in the sun upon the release of their codex. So, and every one of the competitive players that they, you know, quote unquote interview talks about how they believe that like a mix of Drukhari, Adeptus Mechanicus, and Adeptus Sororitas are going to be at the top of the metagame for the foreseeable future. And it's just so on the nose from Games Workshop. A lot of times they like to play it a little close to the chest when it comes to the balance of their game. But, I mean, we've been seeing very clearly the most powerful factions in the game are the ones with the most recent codexes. And this article just leans heavily into that. So, I mean, I guess even according to Games Workshop, if you want to win at 40k, you just buy the latest codex and you go from there. But in this article, they also talked about some of the rules interactions being too powerful in the codex and that we should expect to see an FAQ tomorrow. This article was yesterday, and this FAQ has been released. Let's talk about it and exactly what changed. So, first off, we have Solar Blessing. This is the Forge World Lucius ability to give yourself +1 save against damage 1 attacks. Made their Skitarii incredibly resilient since, if you combined it with, I believe it was the Firepoint Telemetry ability to give them light cover or an additional bonus to their save if they were in cover, then you'd get down to a 2+ save. You could then combine that with their Transhuman ability, Radiant Blessing. You could combine that with their AP ignoring aura as well. And you just had a Skitarii unit that basically nothing in the game could shift. Now Solar Blessing does not stack if you already have light cover. So they are capped at a 3+ save, but all of those other abilities still work. So, alright, well, not a huge change there. Acquisition at any cost got a huge nerf. First of all, it got the Insane Bravery clause where you can only use the stratagem once per game. It actually says you can only use the stratagem once, so maybe you can only use it once in your lifetime. Choose wisely. Basically going to work the same as Insane Bravery. It gave Adeptus Mechanicus access to a better version of Insane Bravery at half the cost, which was pretty good. In addition, now it only works if the unit is wholly within 6 inches of an objective marker, not just within 6 inches of an objective marker. And for these 20-man Skitarii blobs, that's going to be very difficult. This is a good change. I'm happy to see this. Acquisition at any cost is a cool stratagem, but it was obnoxious that the faction's basically only weakness defensively was their poor leadership characteristic, and they had a 1 CP stratagem to auto-pass morale on multiple units. If you had several units of Skitarii on an objective, you would target that objective with the acquisition at any cost. They would all pass, and then you could Insane Bravery another unit elsewhere on the table and take no casualties in the morale phase, which was absolutely disgusting. Enriched rounds and Galvanic Volley Fire, so the big Skitarii stratagems have also been changed as well. Enriched rounds went to a 2 CP/1 CP cost, so it goes up to 2 CP if you have a larger unit. We were considering making some changes, some house rules for the T5S2 Invitational this past season. The players ended up not wanting to go for it, which I think was fair, and in the end, we saw a pretty interesting metagame evolve from that, but this was basically almost exactly, I think, the changes that were proposed. If you're 11 or more models, it doubles in cost, and it only works on 5+ instead of on 4+. I have a sneaking suspicion the 4+ was maybe a typo to begin with, but it was an absolutely brutal stratagem. It allowed you, if you fired your radium carbines, which normally automatically wound on hit rolls of 6, they have the infiltrator bolt carbine, then it would buff that ability to hit to working on 4+. So it essentially give you +2, to hit, quote unquote. And then in addition to the normal wound rolls you got, those would automatically wound. So you were averaging like 18 wounds, assuming that you had reroll 1s to hit from a Exemplar's Eternity Marshal or a Manipulus or a Dominus, which is the guy with the reroll 1s, or I forget. Then you would have 15 more hits basically, or 30 some odd more hits to roll to wound as well. So you would get like average against wounding on 5s, you would get like 40-ish, 45-ish wounds on average. That would then go to saves. You are AP 1 or AP 2, depending on the combination of effects that you are being affected with. It was just insanity. It would on average, it would kill 10 in intercessors. It would kill almost one-shot Mortarion. It would kill any non-vehicle big meaty model in the game. All of those would just get ripped apart by this enriched round stratagem. Now it's going to be significantly less powerful, but it is still going to be good, because one thing you have to remember is that all those 4s that are no longer automatically wounding are then going to just go to... It's not entirely removing that +1 to wound effectively from the stratagem, it's just making it less effective. Now, most of the time, if you're shooting at something that you're enriched roundsing on, you are wounding on 6s. So it's not a lot of extra wounds that you're getting from those standard wound rolls, but it is going to be still significant. Galvanic Volley Fire now changes you from Rapid Fire 2 to Heavy 3 instead of Heavy 2 on the Galvanic Rifle. That stops you from, ignoring the move and shoot penalty with the stratagem, but also stops you from being able to double tap your guns at half range, which was usually like 18 inches, 21 inches, depending on the buffs you had, because they're a long-range weapon to begin with, and then you could buff that range with the Lucius ability, with the Manipulus ability. You had a bunch of different ways to up the range on those galvanic rifles, and then you could, from most of the table, you could move up 6 inches, ignore the move and shoot penalty, double tap for 80 shots out of the unit and really deal an immense amount of damage. Strength 4 at AP 2. Now, it being Heavy 3, this is more of a side grade than it is a strict downgrade, it should be said. It means that you do suffer the move and shoot penalty, basically regardless, unless you have something that can counteract that. And you get less total shots. You're going to get 60 shots out of a unit of Rangers using this ability rather than 80. But you can use this out to any range. So your Ranger unit could just be sitting in the back edge of your table and firing like 36 inches downrange and firing 60 shots. So it makes Rangers less of a frontline combat unit, which is, I imagine, what the idea for the unit was to begin with. It's a little weird because they do get a pregame move, so I guess the play pattern is that you want to move them up to a position where that they can then stand and shoot with the volley fire for the rest of the game, whereas the Vanguards are the ones that want to be getting up there and using those carbines and using those enriched rounds. More of a side grade for Galvanic Volley Fire, but definitely an ability that needed to get looked at. Last up, we see nerfs to Iron Striders and Sidonian Dragoons. Both of them have lost the core keyword, so that's going to basically remove their access to a lot of the auras, especially the Skitarii auras. They're also going to lose access to their reroll 1s to hit and wound off of a Skitarii Marshal. But the unit is still insanely efficient for its cost, and on top of that, still gets access, if you're playing a Martian detachment, which most of the time you are, still gets access to those canticles. So it can still get access to rerolls to a limited extent. It can still get some buffs. I don't think that we see a reduction in the inclusion of Iron Striders, but I do think that we see a little bit of a reduction in their efficiency, which is fine, I guess. Now, as we saw with the Drukhari Codex, the Drukhari errata went through basically 3 phases. There's the cleanup phase, which is what we saw out of the first Adeptus Mechanicus errata. That was just a cleanup of mechanics that had been typoed. This is an actual nerf, and as we saw with Drukhari, they went through 2 rounds of nerfs. So I imagine that we have another series of erratas to level on this codex to bring them in line. But right now, I mean, the general consensus around the community, and especially the Adeptus Mechanicus community, is that this errata is, will reduce their power level for sure, but not in any appreciable measure. There's no points cost changes, effectively, right? There's no Munitorum Field Manual erratas coming with this. So they still put the exact same volume of threats on the table. The threats are marginally less efficient, but the fact that they, in the past traded up like 200 to 300% with units like Iron Striders or Scutarii, and now, only trade up 200%. It means that an Adeptus Mechanicus army, the core mathematics of the faction are still going to beat 90% of the armies in the game. Not to mention the fact that this also doesn't reduce the power of any of the archetypes in the faction that don't revolve around Iron Striders or Scutarii infantry specifically. Anything else in the faction is basically, totally unchanged, so we could potentially see a greater rise in the power of the 6-plane archetypes. We could see more of the vehicle-focused archetypes get played a little bit more. And while it is nice that, I guess to pay lip service to the fact that there are a wide variety of playable archetypes in the faction, the issue is that those are playable archetypes because their models are ridiculously, hyper efficient. This is a totally inappropriate level of nerf. It's not commensurate to the power level of the faction whatsoever, and I don't think we see a dramatic reduction in the instances of Adeptus Mechanicus play or in their win rate. I was expecting a little bit more out of this errata, and I think a lot of the community were as well, but it is what it is. But anyway, that's all I had to say about this today. Just wanted to make a quick video talking about these changes and their implications. A light hand was used, and yeah, we'll just go ahead and leave it there. Thanks everybody for watching. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.